Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and move back into Audition now to really learn what you're doing and how to work with the software here, right? So once you get your files imported, everything's organized, then you can go ahead and start thinking about how the software really works. So I like to do a kind of a broad introduction here and just explain basically how time-based media software editing does work. So the main components of time-based media would be that you have a way to import and organize your files. So that's what this little files sort of palette up here is it's everything that you want to use to kind of break up or cut up or alter or change is going to end up in here. So you want to make sure you have it imported. Again, you can do that through the media browser, or you can just kind of import it through file import. But once you get all those items in there, then the main thing to know is that this is a non-destructive, non-linear editing program, which means that these files, so this one here, this this one that I've got, you can tell it's a file just from the little waveform, right? If I drag this over into the timeline and drop it in there, it will, it's basically gonna show up, and then I can now go in and alter or change this as much as I would like to, and it will, uh, it's gonna just chop up the representation of my file here in this timeline. So this is the same scenario with video and everything else. So it's non-destructive in that it's not actually messing up this. It's just changing the representation I have here in this timeline, which means that until I export out whatever's in the timeline, none of these changes are kind of real. It's just doing kind of a baseline representation of the whole concept. So I'm seeing a preview of what it's going to look like when I kick it out and render it out. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So it's non-destructive, non-linear. It's great. It means I can loop things, change them, and I'm not actually messing up any of my original resources. The other thing to know is that there, in every Adobe product, there's going to be tools. So in Audition, there's very few tools, and something like Photoshop, there's like a lot of tools. But the tools would be up here in this little bar, and you're going to see like a different tools all the time. You're going to have some kind of a move tool. So the move tool here allows me to click and select something either here or in the timeline and like move it around. So you can see that I'm moving the way that the timeline, like when it hits. So there's nothing that's going to happen here until I get to that point. Now it's going to begin. So I can move it with the move tool. There's also going to be some tool that kind of like represents like a razor blade, right? Which goes back to the old days when we were chopping up tape and film and things like that. So you can just select a spot where you want to make a cut and click on that, and it's going to basically put an imaginary line between those two things. If I go back here to the move tool and select that and then hit the delete button, you'll notice that now all I'm doing is dealing with time that I have, the start and stop that I've cut out. So that is that's the basics of like how things cut. But remember, since this is a non-destructive, non-linear process, all it means is that this little clip here, this beginning and end, is just kind of like a window that's rolling over this really long clip. So this long clip is minute 32 seconds. I might have 10 15 seconds or so of footage here, right? So all that means is that if I wanted to, I could, if I'm like, oh, I want it to go a little longer, I could just stretch it out, right? Or I can scooch it in. So again, that's all move tool stuff, and then the razor blade. And then the slip tool, kind of like, it allows me to change what I'm seeing in that window. If you imagine this is a little window that we've cut over this clip of sound here, and then the slip tool is just allowing me to like move what's visible in that window around underneath it. Maybe think of it like a piece of like black paper that you've placed over an image or over like a sound wave representation, and you're just scooching that black paper around just so you're only gonna play what's inside the window. That helps me the way that I think about it. Also, a few other things like this tool here, and the marquee tool, and there's some other lasso tools that you might get into depending on which effect you're after. So that is the basic tools. Then you have like always have ways to change time and duration in these Adobe time-based projects. So again, that's how long or how short or how fast or slow something goes. So again, if I just go back to the I call this the black arrow tool a lot, but the move tool. And if I hit the control click on that, I can bring up all these options on that clip that I've got in my timeline. And I can go down here to I can do lots of things. I can remix, I can stretch it, I can group it. There's all these different options that you can get into. You can loop files. So this will be stuff we'll get into later, but just basically ways to adjust or play around with time and duration. And then the last couple of things you can do would be to distort or affect a piece of footage or sound you've placed in your timeline. So again, the way that would work is I can click on I would make a selection, so select it, then I can distort that, and there's all kinds of effects. So if you go up here into this effects kind of menu, you'll see a ton of these. And let's say I wanted to add like an echo to it. It's going to give me this crazy, this really crazy set of faders and stuff, and I can kind of play around with that. And then, if I just try it and click there, and then push the play button, we'll see how the echo, see how it happens and how it changes it. And so that's just applying an effect. And then I can go back down here to where it says the effects rack, and I can double click that. And that'll bring these sliders back up where I can try a different thing, and we'll see how that one sounds, And so it's just a way of like messing around. But that's how you select a thing that you want to affect, and then you apply the effects. And for Audition, it shows up in this rack. Some other programs it'll show up in a different place, but there are all these different sound effects you can kind of click around on in a couple different places. So we'll kind of play with those more as we go. And then the last thing that these programs allow you to do is to export or kind of render your projects, right? So once you get some edits made, you can go up to File, and you'll see there's a couple of different options for that, but you can go to Export, and then you can export it out in a whole bunch of different ways, which we'll talk about as we get closer to the end. But so that hopefully that makes sense. You have sort of your organization import sort of space. You have the tools that you can use. You have ways to alter time and duration, and then you have distortions. And then in the last bit, you would export it. So that's the basics of how it works. Anytime you get lost in an Adobe product, let's say that you can't find the files thing, like it got closed on accident, you don't know where it went. Remember, you can always go up here into Window and just find it and make sure there's a check mark next to it, and it'll bring it back up for you. And there's also ways you can go in here and change like different ways of looking at things. So there's lots of different ways to adjust that, which we'll talk about more later on. And there's also workspaces. So if you were doing some kind of like kind of radio production, let's say, you can click this workspace, and it'll give you the tools and the palettes it thinks are most important for someone who's doing that kind of work. If you go back to the workspaces and you go to like sort of that's to like fix audio that's broken, probably not that one. You might want to go to this one, simple editing. That one might be a good one to start with, but there's lots of options. I usually just go with kind of the default one to begin, and you can also save workspaces as custom workspaces and stuff. So that's it. Hopefully this helps you get going. So sort of start playing around with that, and then we'll actually start working with the video files here in the next video.